Frank, let me start with you, if I may. In September, if my research is correct, it was in September of 1968, the unmanned Russian, what was that, Zond 5? Zond 5 made an orbit of the moon. Did this affect your mission?
I'm not certain whether it affected our mission or not. I was told that the CIA had intelligence that Russians were going to try to put a man around it before the end of the year. And that was the reason for the change in our mission. Because after all, the Apollo program was just a battle in the Cold War. That's what it was, fundamentally, a battle in the Cold War.
Boy, you hammered it. You hammered the whole theme of my series of questions here.
Oh,
but,
I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That's
you want
great.
to start over?
No, all I have to do is shut up. Point. And you shut up. James, what was the original mission? How did it change?
The original mission actually was an Earth orbital mission to test the command module again and the lunar module for the first time, and to make sure that both of them would work before we committed them to the moon. And we'd also do a high-speed reentry, just like we would come back from the moon, to test out the reentry procedure of this supercircular type of reentry. And of course, when Apollo 7 went 11 days was successful, and we had some idea that Frank mentioned that the Russians were going to put a man around the moon, and the lunar module was not ready by 1968, then a very bold decision on the part of NASA management decided to take Apollo 8 around the moon.
Well, bold it was. Bill, what would you think the odds of success for this bold mission? Did you calculate that at all?
Well, frankly, I thought we had about a 1 chance in 3 of having a successful mission. Another 1 chance in 3 of having a mission like Apollo 13 where they made it back but weren't able to accomplish the landing. And then maybe a 1 chance in 3 of not making it back.
Well, that's pretty chilling. Those aren't very good odds, are they?
Well, you keep in mind, as Frank said, this was not a program to explore the moon or develop technology. It was a program to demonstrate to the world and to ourselves that American technology was preeminent and that we could beat the Soviets in that regard.
And that's where the new Saturn rocket came into this mix?
Saturn rocket was necessary in order to do this.
Of course, there were, one thinks and one believes and one has been told that the NASA always been very fastidious about testing before sending any humans out on these kinds of missions. What were there concerns about using the new Saturn after just such limited testing? Let me ask you, Frank.
I didn't have any concern with that. Each astronaut had a specialty. Mine happened to be boosters. So I spent a lot of time in Huntsville and helped to develop the crew escape system and so on. And the people at Huntsville were confident that they had been able to correct the difficulties that were experienced on the first 2 Saturn V flights. There had been 2 unmanned flights before. And the second one was almost a disaster. But
what happened? I didn't remember.
Well, they had an engine shut down. They had an enormous pogo. An 18-inch beam was vibrating over a foot. It was a real disaster. But they convinced the NASA management, and I was convinced that they knew how to solve it, and they did.
Going back to that film we just saw there, Jim, you were obviously the first men to both leave the Earth's gravitation and see the dark side of the moon. You were the first ones to ever do that. That precise timing, what concerns did you have at the time before you went on that mission?
Well, Nick, I really didn't have much concern. I was sort of happy that that decision was made. And I agree with Frank that I didn't have any apprehensions about the Saturn V. Since Apollo 7 went around the Earth for 11 days, I thought going to the moon would be a natural follow-on. You know, we were 3 explorers doing something entirely different. We were going the entire distance, 240,000 miles, and we're going to see the far side of the moon, which we never see the far side, of course, from the Earth. And so I was quite excited about it. It was, though, in the morning when we got to the top of the gantry, and my 2 companions went into the spacecraft first. It was still dark out, and the press cars started to come and man the station. And I looked at them, and I looked down at the ground, And I said, these people are really serious. This is not another Earth orbital flight. This is going to the moon. And that maybe was the time when I said, well, here we go.
I guess you all said, here we I want to get to that picture. Bill, you were talking about this before. In that film we just saw, that the Earth rising above the horizon of the moon, we saw two pictures there, I believe, of that shot. Which one was yours, or were they both yours?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that if Frank had told me about this vibration, I'm not sure I'd have gone. First I heard about it.
The pogo.
But I did have my blanket and some stuff. Actually, it's my understanding that the first shot was the Apollo 11 Earthrise, and that the still picture was the Apollo 8 Earthrise.
It must have lent itself to some grand thoughts when you saw that, the Earth rising above the horizon of the moon.
Well, what struck me, I mean, I think we were all taken aback, because there had been no planning, discussion of seeing the Earth. We were trained to a degree to explore the moon, to comment on the topography and geology, if you will, of the moon. And when I saw the Earthrise, and then also pictures of the small Earth from a lunar distance, it crossed my mind that, here we'd spent all this time studying the moon, and what we were doing was discovering the Earth.
Wow. Tagging on to that then, taking it to the next step. Which one of you, or did you do this together, decided to read from Genesis?
Well, the Genesis reading, about 6 weeks before the flight, I got a call from Julian Scheer, who was the head of the PI for NASA, and his widow is here today somewhere. I saw her. There she is right there. And if you can imagine this, Julian said, hey, Frank, you're going to have the largest TV audience that's ever listened to a man on that broadcast from the moon on Christmas Eve. I said, gee, that's nice, Julian. What should we do? He said, anything that's appropriate. Right there, that was the essence of this country. If we'd have been Soviets, we'd have been talking about Lenin or this or that. And I got the instructions to tell the crew to just do what's appropriate. And so frankly, I think we were all really busy with the flight plan. That was the last thing on my mind. I don't know about you guys, but I contacted a friend of mine, Cy Borgen, and about 2 weeks before the flight, he came back with the idea of maybe reading from Genesis, and we all liked it, and that's how it happened. Almost ad hoc, but so appropriate.
Well, just as one of the ones who was back here watching, may I tell you that was one of the most moving experiences of the entire NASA program, and that is saying a lot. That's a considerable thing to say.
Let me explain a little bit more of what Frank was talking about, because Cy Borgen was trying to think up something to say that was appropriate, which was Genesis, of course, but he went to a newspaper man, Joe Layton, and said, look, if you write articles all the time, write prose, what would be appropriate for the Apollo 8 crew to say? And so Joe Layton spent up most of the night trying to figure out what would be appropriate around the moon on Christmas Eve to say to millions of people all around the Earth. And finally, his wife came down, and she said, what are you doing? And he told her what his project was. And she said, well, it's natural. Read the first 10 verses of Genesis, which is the foundation of most of the world's religions, not just the Christian religion, but most of the people who will be listening to you are probably not Christian. And that's how it finally came to pass.
Well, she should get a plaque somewhere on this.
I think she should.
And thank heaven she didn't say, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. What a great and
Somebody else said that, though.
Yes.